Twitter is now targeting Trump with censorship. No other political leader is being targeted like Trump with censorship, but Trump is. They attached a fact check link to President Trump's tweets related to election fraud, voter fraud, the menace to free elections caused by uncontrolled and out of control and unlawful mail-in ballots, as we've talked about here. And the fact check was fake. As I say, I guess I gotta start pulling up all my tweets so I can tell you about them. Twitter is violating their own rules in putting out false information about election fraud to counter the alleged false information from the President of the United States. They put their thumb on the scales in favor of an illegal policy change in California that they say is, quote, only limited to registered voters, people eligible to vote. Well, that's the whole point of the concern that the president has raised, that they will have people get ballots in California who aren't obligated, who aren't supposed to be getting them, meaning people who moved away or people who are dead because they're still on the rolls and are registered, quote, to vote. Now, let me take a step back. Governor Newsom in California has decided on his own to require all counties in California, contrary to California law and the Constitution, because the Constitution only gives this power to the legislature. He's requiring all counties to send ballots to all registered voters. So that means there'll be 20 million ballots flooding the system. Now, as Judicial Watch has already shown in prior litigation and our prior studies, California voting rolls are a mess. Los Angeles County settled a lawsuit with Judicial Watch, 1.6 million names they're in the process of removing, up to 1.6 million names. We did a study over in 2019 in 14 counties. I want to be specific here because I don't want to get banned by Twitter because I'm saying something that their leftist allies don't like. Judicial Watch data, this is on my Twitter feed, it's at Tom Fitton. Judicial Watch found in 2019, the data shows at least 1.1 million extra names on voter rolls in 14 counties in California. LA County alone had 640,000 extra names and is in process of removing up to 1.6 million inactive names from rolls as a result of the lawsuit settlement with Judicial Watch. So when I mean extra names, I mean these are names above and beyond the number of people in the voting age population. So I think the stat we found in Los Angeles is that it was 110% of the voting age population was registered to vote. That means they have 10% more people on the rolls who are living there and eligible to vote. And so Los Angeles, they've got 640,000 of those, quote, extra names on the rolls, at least as of 2019. Now, those numbers change over time depending on who's moving in and out and the number of eligible voters or eligible citizens. But the point being, those are indications that the voting lists in California are dirty. And when you send ballots to people who have moved away and shouldn't be there, that's where you get the opportunity for voter fraud. That's where you get the opportunities for rigging elections. And when you tie that all together with ballot harvesting, it's really can potentially lead to chaos on election day. I talked to a reporter the other day from a left-leaning publication, and the point of his story is that people on both the left and the right are concerned and I think I'm fairly characterizing the piece, because the right isn't trying to change the system. The left is trying to change the system. And they're concerned that these last-minute changes to the system, both illegal and otherwise, are going to cause chaos on election day. Why is that? Because people are used to voting in person. Now, I understand absentee ballots are widely available. They already are widely available. Many, many people vote by mail. But as the Carter-Baker Commission found, I think it was in 2005, that voting by mail and the absentee ballot process is particularly susceptible to voter fraud. Just think about it. You go to vote in person, you're doing it under the guide. Usually you've got a government official there, and you've got members of both parties often observing to make sure nothing weird's going on. So not only are you protected in the confidentiality of having your vote placed with the protection of law and law enforcement and all the laws that apply to the protection of ballot places, polling places. It's the best way to have your vote counted. Yes, you can vote by mail. I think it's 33 states don't require any excuse to get an absentee ballot. So I tell you what, if you're nervous about voting on election day, figure out what your state's laws are and request an absentee ballot if the law allows it. Some states, the law won't allow it. Your being afraid to get sick is probably not an emergency reason to get an absentee ballot in many states. States may change the law through their legislature, which is what the Constitution requires. And I don't think that's a good idea either as well. We should be encouraging people to vote in person. And when you're mailing in ballots, as the left wants to do now in millions and millions of extra cases, you can't be sure your vote's going to be counted. You can't be sure that even the elections will be fully understood as to who won or lost for days, if not weeks. I think in Los Angeles County, we pointed out in our lawsuit to stop Newsom's illegal scheme, the lawsuit we filed last week. Los Angeles County was a disaster. They had a vote by mail plan. Under the law, it was lawful, but it didn't work because they didn't have the systems in place. So we're now asking, we're at the 30-yard line, practically speaking, before Election Day. As far as, actually, we're at the 10-yard line. Because if you're an election official, you need to have everything ready. Beginning probably next month, in the least. It's too late. So the left is trying to introduce this chaos factor into our elections by flooding the systems with mail ballots. Or in the case of Michigan, I think it's absentee ballot applications. California, it's just radical. What Mr. Governor Newsom is proposing to do, just mailing ballots, flooding the system. Now, the Republican National Committee has since also sued to try to stop that scheme in California. So what's happened now is that Judicial Watch's lawsuit on behalf of voters who are fearful that their votes won't get counted or thrown out under this illegal scheme. I mean, the irony is that the mail ballots may not be valid in the end. That's why it's got to be stopped. So people's votes aren't unnecessarily lost and thrown out because the ballots are invalid. So the two cases are now together before one federal court judge. So we'll see how that goes. But Twitter is trying to, quote, fact check this by essentially using leftist talking points and suppressing and labeling and mislabeling the president's informational tweets on this material. Let me talk about fact checking, because this is what the leftists have been doing in social media to try to suppress conservatives. Fact checking is a vehicle for the left to suppress conservative views, points, and authority that they don't like. It's exactly what Judicial Watch has suffered from this fake fact checking assault repeatedly over the years. We do a story, for instance, and they say, well, who are your sources? And we say, you can't have your source. You can't have our sources. And so what do they say? It's false, because we can't fact check their story, which is sort of garbage. No other journalist entity is supposed to give up their sources in order to avoid being mislabeled as false. If you got different facts, or you want to challenge facts, challenge them. It's a free society, or at least it ought to be. But the left is using, and their media allies, who pretend to be in favor of the First Amendment, they're really not. They're using these fact checkers, which are largely, almost universally left-leaning media organizations and fronts, to target conservatives. And now they're targeting Donald Trump. Twitter is using CNN and the Washington Post, which are anti-Trump advocacy groups. Notice I didn't call them journalists. They sometimes do journalism, that's for sure, but they're advocacy groups. So in response to this growing problem, I mean, I know I was shadow banned on Twitter. What's shadow banning mean? It means that if you type in, let's say, my name, there's no suggestion. There was at one point no suggestion. There's an autofill. If you do a search, my name wasn't popping up. I'm a public figure. I'm a prominent person, at least within certain circles. None of us are as important as we think, aren't we? But certainly if you type in the word Tom Fitton, you think my name would pop up, and it wasn't. And so were other conservatives, including members of Congress. This was happening a few years ago. This is 2018, I think it happened. President of the United States is tweeting out my material, and I'm being shadow banned. Meaning if you went to look for me, you couldn't find me on Twitter. The good news is it doesn't work. And this is why the media is so desperate to shut us down. This week, my account, my personal account, has passed 1 million followers. I have 1 million followers on Twitter. I want to thank you for those of you who are following me. That must drive the left crazy, though, right? Because that's a wonderful platform. It's a wonderful platform we have on the internet, through Facebook, through Twitter. I mean, I know we don't like the suppression of conservative voices on those platforms, but they're where the people are. And we're now able to educate millions and millions of people, not only here in the United States, but worldwide, that we otherwise would never have been able to do prior to the internet age. The Judicial Watch has 1.6 million followers on Twitter. On Facebook, I think we have 6 million followers on Facebook. It's incredible. So sometimes if we send out tweets or send out Facebook posts, more people will see our material than people who are watching the news that day on some of the major networks. That's why they want to shut us down. They don't want to shut us down because we're losing. They want to shut us down because we're winning. If we weren't successful, they wouldn't care.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.